Chernobyl, a place that keeps the world on edge even 40 years after the worst nuclear disaster in history. A site so radioactive that spending just a few minutes there means certain death. People who rappelled down over an open reactor core inside lead-lined capsules and a protective shield that threatens to crumble under the strain. What exactly is happening in Chernobyl right now? We'll take a look at that today and dive right in. Chernobyl, the very word alone triggers a queasy feeling in most people. But let's start from the beginning. The reactor explosion was so powerful that it literally blew off the reactor's lid, which weighed several thousand tons and tore open the reactor building. Due to the immense heat of the nuclear meltdown, the fuel rods began to melt. This nuclear lava, which scientists later termed corium, is a mixture of zirconium from the fuel rod cladding, concrete from the walls, and steel from the structures. The result was a highly radioactive mixture that ate its way through the lower floors of the reactor building. Scientists could only speculate from a safe distance. Only after some time, as the radiation slowly subsided, could more detailed investigations be conducted. It turned out that the corium consisted not only of fuel residues and reactor material, but had also undergone chemical reactions that created new, previously unknown compounds. About 2 days after the explosion, this molten mass flowed into a room below the reactor, room 217-2. There it slowly cooled and solidified, forming this nightmarish structure. In the days immediately following its formation, the elephant's foot emitted about 10,000 roentgens per hour, 20 times more than an already lethal dose. But how do you study something you can't even enter without dying? First, the researchers had to figure out where the nuclear fuel was located. They sent cameras on remote-controlled vehicles into the contaminated areas and thus discovered this eerie formation for the first time. When they tried to take samples, they ran into another problem. The elephant's foot was incredibly hard. The remote-controlled drill could not penetrate the glass-like surface. After several failed attempts, including one by an impulsive soldier who struck the mass with an axe, exposing himself to a dangerous dose of radiation. In the end, they fired a Kalashnikov at the elephant's foot to finally obtain samples. Analysis revealed that it was a strange black ceramic, primarily composed of silicon dioxide fused with uranium oxides and other radioactive isotopes. In total, scientists estimate that about 170 tons of nuclear material was scattered beneath the reactor. What is fascinating about the elephant's foot is how it has changed over time. In early photos, it had a metallic sheen and a solid structure, but continuous radiation has altered its consistency. Over time, cracks formed, the sheen disappeared, and today, more than 35 years later, it has, according to scientists, more or less the consistency of sand. Although radiation levels have dropped to about 1/10 of their original value, the change in structure poses new dangers. This is because the substance is disintegrating into dust that could become airborne and be inhaled. While alpha radiation normally cannot penetrate the skin, it is particularly dangerous when radioactive particles are inhaled or swallowed. Particularly remarkable is the story of Arthur Kornev, a Kazakh-Russian nuclear expert who was assigned the task of locating the scattered fuel in the depths of Chernobyl and measuring radiation levels. In 1996, when the radiation had already subsided somewhat, he ventured into the room with a camera and took that ghostly image that many of you may have seen before. And by the way, the grainy texture of the photo isn't due to a poor quality camera, it's the radiation itself that affected the film. Kornev is said to have later remarked at the age of 65 about his work in Chernobyl, "We were the pioneers, we were always on the front lines, Soviet radiation is the best radiation in the world." Today, the elephant's foot is enclosed in the so-called sarcophagus, which was built over the destroyed reactor. Since 2016, there has even been a new, improved containment structure called the New Safe Confinement. But the elephant's foot remains a constant challenge for science. It is still slowly melting into the ground beneath Chernobyl and could eventually contaminate the groundwater. The story of the elephant's foot is thus a powerful reminder of the power and dangers of nuclear fission. At the same time, however, it also demonstrates the courage and determination of the people who risked their lives to understand and contain the effects of the disaster. This eerie mass of molten uranium, concrete, and metal hidden in the dark basements of Chernobyl reminds us how important it is to treat the power we have gained over nature with responsibility. The elephant's foot is not just a monument to a past disaster, it is in a way a constant reminder never to underestimate the forces we unleash. But the rest of the building also posed enormous challenges for the scientists. How could they stabilize and contain this ticking nuclear time bomb? The damaged reactor was exposed and was freely releasing radioactive material into the surrounding area. The only realistic solution was to construct a massive structure that later became known as the sarcophagus. Immediately after the accident, radiation levels near the reactor ranged from 30 to 50 sieverts per hour, and directly at the reactor they were many times higher, 10 times higher than lethal doses. Robots that were attempted to be deployed failed miserably. Their electronics were fried by the massive radiation, so special protective capsules were built in which people could be lowered directly into the heart of the disaster. Weighing an incredible 18 tons, this first version was relatively small but extremely heavy. The reason? The walls were made of centimeter-thick lead, designed to shield against the deadly gamma radiation. The lead layer reduced radiation to 100 millisieverts per hour. Normally, we are exposed to 2 to 3 millisieverts of radiation per year. But in 1986, given the circumstances, this was considered an acceptable risk. The structure consisted of a wall with a reinforced lead window and another section with a heavy lid-shielded door. Inside were an intercom and a speaker for communication, 2 joysticks to control an external video camera, a small basket for mineral water, a seat, and some backup batteries. A military filtration system was installed on the roof. The men inside were mostly high-ranking engineers. Much of this story remained secret for a long time. Boris Cherbina, the head of the state task force in Chernobyl and one of the highest-ranking government officials on site, enforced an exceptionally strict information policy, with the exception of carefully staged heroic images for propaganda. Helen Kozlova, who was herself on the mission, published her colleagues' stories years later. A problem arose as early as the first mission. The wind was too strong and the capsule was swaying too much. The camera could not capture usable images. The capsule was lowered. Engineer Major Gorb was dressed in lead aprons and the capsule was raised again, this time with the door wide open for better visibility. In a later operation, liquid concrete was to be poured into a critical area. A cable from the diagnostic sensor snapped, and the concrete flowed continuously to the wrong spot. Leo Bocharov later recalled, "There were several flights at the height of a 22-story building. As I was inspecting the condition of the supports for the level, the crane suddenly failed and I was left hanging above the reactor shaft like a light bulb in the kitchen. They told me over the intercom to wait a bit. They were fixing the crane. Of course, I waited because it didn't seem like I could go anywhere. The whole system wasn't optimal. The center of gravity was too high, so they welded a counterweight to it. New capsules were designed shortly thereafter. They were larger, had more windows, much thicker walls, and a better filtration system. There were even small openings through which one could reach outside with a specially protected hand. This made tasks such as cutting, welding, sealing gaps, adjusting cover plates, and unhooking loads possible. A dramatic incident occurred during preparations for the installation of a 127-ton steel girder. This girder was intended to support the roof from the south side and required a truly solid foundation. The wet cement seeped uncontrollably into the rubble beneath the building. A capsule was dispatched to inspect the area, and during this mission, it suddenly found itself beneath the pipe pouring the concrete. The cement splashed over the protective windows, completely blinding the occupants. With no other choice, they opened the door in the middle of the mission. They were exposed to 300 roentgens per hour, but were able to complete the inspection. They realized that the concrete wouldn't work, and so a massive steel structure was built instead. A capsule crashed from a great height. By pure chance, no one was inside, but further use of this capsule was subsequently banned. They were eventually buried at the radioactive waste dump in Vorokovka. The site remains highly dangerous to this day. You may know that a massive steel structure has been erected over the old reactor, known as the new safe confinement. It's a kind of oversized protective cover designed to contain radioactive material and the old crumbling concrete structures beneath it. It was completed in 2016 at a cost of 1.5 billion euros, making it the largest movable structure in the world. It sounds bomb-proof, but it wasn't, in the truest sense of the word. But on February 14, 2025, a massive explosion shattered the silence over the exclusion zone. A drone attack had struck the massive protective shell of Reactor 4. A press release stated the IAEA inspection mission has confirmed that the protective structure has lost its primary safety function, including its containment capability. But from the start, what exactly is this all about? The new safe confinement is a gigantic structure, 108 meters high, taller than the Statue of Liberty, with a span of 257 meters and a total weight of a whopping 36,000 tons of steel. The old sarcophagus was hastily built in 1986 following the meltdown under extreme radiation exposure and with a planned lifespan of only about 30 years. The new shell was designed to last at least 100 years and not only prevent the escape of radioactive particles, but also create a protected space for the future decommissioning of the destroyed reactor. Inside the ruins, there are still all sorts of radioactive anomalies, but now to the attack itself. The device used was likely a Shahed 136 drone equipped with a high-explosive warhead weighing between 50 and 90 kilograms. The explosion tore holes in the outer cladding of the steel structure and triggered a fire. The good news is that the massive load-bearing elements remained intact, as did the internal monitoring systems. However, the attack severely compromised the structure's airtightness, allowing moisture and condensation to penetrate unimpeded, which could accelerate corrosion of the steel elements and jeopardize stability in the long term. Jim Smith, an environmental scientist at the University of Portsmouth, told the BBC, "The greatest risk lies in the local stirring up of radioactive dust." Since the old concrete sarcophagus is still located beneath the new shell, the immediate danger to the surrounding area is low. In principle, therefore, the old concrete sarcophagus serves as a kind of safety net. The two protective shells function like a double barrier. Even if the outer shell is damaged, the inner sarcophagus continues to prevent the release of large quantities of radioactive particles. In fact, the IAEA has not yet measured any significant increase in radiation levels outside the exclusion zone. But the problem isn't what's happening right now, but what could happen in the future. The moisture seeping in accelerates corrosion, which could dramatically shorten the structure's lifespan, and repairing this gigantic structure is no walk in the park. We're talking about an active war zone, complex logistics, enormous costs, and the need for highly specialized personnel. The airspace over Chernobyl remains a danger zone, which makes the work even more difficult. Initial temporary repair measures are planned for 2026, followed by a larger renovation phase. It is a race against time and against the elements. Humanity is building a technical masterpiece designed to withstand earthquakes, storms, and extreme temperatures, but no one seriously considered securing it against drone attacks. The engineers probably couldn't have imagined that their structure would one day become a target of military attacks. Times have certainly changed. 3 stories that show how radioactivity can leave a lasting impact not only in the present, but also throughout history. If you'd like to see more content like this, subscribing to the channel is the best way to make sure you don't miss a single video. This brings us to a video that is very close to my heart and for which I even traveled personally. I visited CERN in Switzerland, home to the world's largest particle accelerator, 27 kilometers of tunnels where particles collide at nearly the speed of light. And all of this with a single goal, to recreate the conditions shortly after the Big Bang. I got to see how it actually works. And I put a lot of heart and soul into this video, so be sure to click the link in the top right corner and check it out. As always, there's another video about science and space in the bottom right corner. Otherwise, I'd say, see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.